talk about making this journey together. And you mentioned earlier that when you're at Lockheed Martin and you had this vision of serving the church in this way, your wife encouraged you to leave your job, and um, she's your partner in this journey. How important is that decision, and what advice would you have for single people about who they choose to journey with in that way?
It's a good question. I think, for us, we were able to talk about a lot of important things before we got married, which was great. I think one of the most important skill sets today that a lot of people never really learn is how to make a good home. And I think that's a great place to start with somebody before you get married is what kind of home do you want? And this goes into even choosing what career you want. Is your career compatible with the kind of home that you want to have? Is your skill set that you're trying to go get so you can support your family compatible with the kind of home and lifestyle that you want to have with your family and your children? But getting on the same page with your spouse about those things is really important before you get married. And of course, it's an evolving journey you go on together, and it's part of the adventure. Um, I think I was really fortunate with my wife too. We were able to go. So she was not Catholic when we met, and over time she became interested in it, and she ended up becoming Catholic before we got married because that was something really important to me and for us to share that faith before we got married, to make sure that that was something we shared in common for our family because it was so essential to reordering our life around it. So pretty important for us to agree on it. So we were fortunate to go on that journey before we got married, and she went through the RCIA process, and we were able to go through that together, which was a great blessing. We had a great
Mm.
RCIA teacher, and it wasn't me teaching her the faith or telling her what I think, but for us to go on that journey together and hear someone else explain it and teach it to us was really helpful. So I would recommend doing some of things like that, where you get to explore your faith and your beliefs, especially if you differ in some of those things. Doing something like that together, where there's a third party, sort of sharing something with you, and you can both, reflect on it and grow through it, was really helpful process for us and a beautiful journey. So it created a really powerful, strong foundation for our marriage, because we had already thought through a lot of those things. We had wrestled with a lot of those questions, and knew what we wanted generally as much as you could at that time when we got married.
What was something that you thought you wanted back then that you realized you didn't want, or what is something you thought was important back then that isn't important anymore? Or how has your perception changed through the years of marriage and having six children and growing this business and serving the church in this way?
I think I've grown in desire for simplicity and realizing that you don't have to do a lot of things to have a really full life. That if you are willing to go deep in the few things that you have, um, there's a lot of treasure there, more than you can ever discover.
Mm.
And there's a temptation. I struggled with this for a long time, and it's the whole social media struggle as well, um, where there's this fear of missing out. There's all these things going on, um, but that ability to say no to something so that you can fully say yes to something else is a really important distinction, because you feel like you can say yes to everything and you don't want to say no to anything. But every yes you say to something here is a no to something else. You won't face it. You won't admit it. And what happens is you don't get around to it, or you don't appreciate it or do it as deeply as you could. But you are saying no to something else, and we just don't have the courage to admit it sometimes. And I think recognizing that you don't have to have everything, everyone doesn't have to know who you are. You don't have to have this huge sort of impact, which again, I think for my generation too, social media, coming of age as social media, became so popular, there was such an emphasis on people knowing about what you're doing. It's like if people didn't know that it happened, then it didn't happen. If it's
Mm.
not documented somewhere where people could like it and share it or whatever, then it doesn't exist, which is such an unhealthy way to live. But I think it's just normal for us now, even if we don't think we think that way. I think when we look at our behaviors, a lot of times that's how we actually are valuing things, is based on whether they can be shared or whether somebody else knows about it. Um, and so that's what I've loved about completely getting off of all of the social media stuff, because you realize that you can breathe again, and the light, and that life isn't nearly as overwhelming as it may feel sometimes. That you can, God's given you enough time and energy and everything you need to do exactly what he wants you to do today, and you don't have to worry about all that. You just need to discern what it is and do it.